So basically we're doing shame and self-compassion. Now, shame is one of the most challenging of emotions, but dealt with compassion, it can be a very good antidote to that feeling. Now, the caveat is that if you've experienced a traumatic experience or a PTSD, it would be a good idea to only do this activity with a professional. 99, well, no, not 99 actually, 90% of people have experienced trauma in their lives. But it's about up to, in the teens percentage that can manifest itself as PTSD, as a traumatic experience. So that's about 8 to 20% of people will get a post-traumatic stress disorder. Which means that in a setting where we're practicing mindfulness as we are today, there's a high probability that this could be a triggering practice. So, how do we define shame? Shame is how you see yourself in the eyes of the others, and it's completely different to guilt. Guilt is when we've done something bad. I made a mistake. Shame is when we think we're bad. For example, I'm a mistake. Now, when it comes to integrating the self, which is a key way of dealing with traumatic PTSD experience, there's two parts to PTSD and trauma. So this is why I'm giving you this caveat to be aware of this practice. One of them is fear. And Bessel van der Kolk is about you'll be so terrified of your internal experience that it's not safe to go inside the container of your body. And when we practice mindfulness, we practice awareness of the body. The other one is shame, because shame is about us berating ourselves, and people who have had a very traumatic experience believe that they brought that trauma on themselves. Now, I've been reading a lot of trauma in relation to oppression, such with the Black Lives Matter movement, and also Black trans lives as well. Because trauma is much, much more common, PTSD, within those types of communities that are oppressed. They internalise paralysing unworthiness. And to work with that, you have to work with somebody, a professional, who can provide a safe, trusting environment to work on shame, which is about self-forgiveness and self-compassion. There is absolutely no wisdom in carrying on with this practice if it's too difficult. And I'm going to quote James Baldwin, who is one of the greatest Black American writers. And he wrote this in 1962. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. So that's the paradox, isn't it? That's the paradox there. If you can face it, then you can probably work to change it, but not everything can be. And it's probably better to step away. Now, I'm talking about maladaptive shame. Maladaptive shame is when you talk about yourself as saying that there's nothing wrong with you, whereas guilt can be productive and motivation. Shame is paralysing and unproductive. You feel trapped. And shame can arrive underneath other emotions and can be displayed as other emotions. Displayed as anger, fear and despair, and as a coping mechanism we will hide it, because shame is one of those emotions where we never divulge, and it's the one that causes the most isolation. And holding shame and isolating yourself with it keeps it alive. There's a paradox to do with shame, and obviously I've been reading a lot about attachment theory and childhood development. And shame derives from a need, an instinctive need as a baby and a child to be loved. It's a universal desire. And this is where the shame comes from, because we're so desperate to be loved. We blame ourselves, so we hide the shame. Because when you're a baby or a child, you're helpless, you need you need to survive, and you need the protection of others to look after you. You want to be accepted. But then again, as we become adults, the need to be loved never ever stops. So what we do is we hide our shame. Quote, "Oh my God, if people knew about me, I wouldn't be lovable." So shame is incredibly self-isolating, and everybody feels it, but everybody suffers in silence. Because it's linked to something called negative core beliefs, which is what the psychologists call it. Negative core beliefs about ourselves, where we create an emotional chain reaction of negative views about ourselves, that we're unworthy, unlovable, and it can be very strongly linked to imposter syndrome. And I think there are certain types of people who feel shame more. When I read so much about trauma and shame, you're less likely to have experienced it, and you're more likely to get through it if you come from a privileged position. So if you're black, ethnic minority, trans, female, so there is a hierarchy of privilege, and being white, European, male would mean that would be the apotheosis of privilege. I'm privileged, definitely. But a lot of women suffer from trauma, because we have to look at the statistics of women who have suffered from abuse, whether it be in a relationship, marriage and so forth, and that internalised shame. So it's a touchy, difficult subject. So yes, please turn the camera off, the video off now, if this is too much. To understand and work with shame is to confront the systems of oppression and the context of how it occurs in many forms. And though Buddhism says, and mindfulness philosophy says, that mindfulness is non-judgmental acceptance of shame, that is a challenge for anybody who's got trauma and PTSD. They will always believe that trauma is their fault and that they're not unable to heal. So this practice is only for people who have not been in a PTSD, deeply traumatic experience. I may talk about historical, racial, traumatic experience in a different context, in a different place, but it won't be linked to any mindfulness practice. That's for the professionals. I try to work with an embodied approach to trauma in my yoga practices, to allow people to develop a safe awareness of their body rather than rejecting it, because Van der Kolk said your whole body becomes something that you reject. And as somebody myself who has had a traumatic experience that's affected me deeply throughout my life, I know exactly how that feels. And it did manifest itself in my own eating disorder, which was my way of rejecting my body because I hated it. And that's what you do. You get body dysmorphic, or I suppose. It's taken me decades to work it all out, and I have now, but it's taken time, and it's still with me, and I still deal with it every day. But the thing is, being a survivor and getting through it means that you're stronger than you think. So if you are going through it, I understand. Because at the end of the day, the only way for anybody to be supported is to be listened to and to work with somebody that you can trust. and I mean really, really trust. Somebody who can listen to you without interrupting or giving you advice or telling you what you should do. The definition of PTSD and trauma is an experience where there is a lack of compassionate witness to that experience, where you were not listened to. And it's important that compassion is so important part of this mindfulness that we're doing. One of the key components of mindfulness is compassionate listening. Something that we can't do, obviously, because this is a very one-sided practice. But compassionate listening is a skill that I'm hoping that you can really, really work on, and I want to work on it too. I'm working on my own prejudices, and I'm working on my own triggers and my reactions, because I know how triggered I am from my past experiences and how trauma works, how I can overreact and get angry or upset, if you can sit with somebody without interjecting and listen with your heart, then you will go a long way. And I hope that you get that opportunity to practice that without interjecting, without giving advice. That's what true compassionate listening is, because people who've suffered the most do not feel as though they have been listened to. And that can be anybody from any community. I think today's session has come entirely out of Black Lives Matter, because I'm realising so much. We're all being consciously going through a conscious raising process, and I think that's fantastic. I'm raising my consciousness as somebody of privilege all the time, and I'm reading more and more books, and that's so important. And I hope we're all going through the same process. The same process. I've just been reading a book this afternoon where George Floyd, there's so many. I read one chapter and it detailed 2 people who were black who both died at the hands of police officers, and they were unarmed, and they were both in a chokehold. And the last words were exactly the same as George Floyd: "I cannot breathe." And I think of Grenfell Tower on Sunday, and I think about the anniversary of that and how these came from low-paid ethnic minorities, social housing. And it becomes this experience of historical, racial. We're talking about trauma that's linked to low economic groups, because they're more likely to do the most dangerous jobs. They're on the front line at the moment. And also we're going through a period of collective trauma. I talked about that when we talked about disenfranchised grief. Everybody is having a traumatic experience with this. So compassionate witnessing for this disenfranchised grief is so important, because we're all sat in our own homes and we're all in deep mourning for a life that we can't get back. But this has got a lot to do with shame, because we're all at the moment thinking, why am I feeling like this? You probably feel shame for the fact that you're grieving, because you think, well, it's not that bad, is it? My life is not as bad as some people's. And then you feel shame for that. Shame is anything where it's internally paralysing, of unworthiness. And also as well, because we're struggling with our mental health, because of what's happening with social distancing, we feel shame not to want to share it with other people. We suffer this shame of silence, embarrassment, for anything. I don't want to burden somebody with my condition. So yes, shame takes many forms. So this practice, we're not going to do shame, because we don't want to turn the tap on. We're going to do a drip. You can do it on the floor, laid on your back. You can do it seated. We're only going to focus on an embarrassed situation, not shame. That's too much. But when we do this, it's about an embarrassed situation. It can be about anything. I was thinking about it the other night, and I was reading the book. And I think I was reading Karlove Now Scoured, and he constantly talks about his own embarrassment about things that he's done, because it's very confessional. I just want you to think about an embarrassing situation that's basically on a level of 3 on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being positive and 10 being negative. So let's start the practice, and I want you to always remember when we do this thing, I want you to always remember that your shame comes from your deep, deep desire to want to be loved. And that's a good thing, isn't it? Always remember that. You always want to be loved. That's the only reason why you feel embarrassed, because you want to be loved. No other reason. That's where it comes from. Like a child, when you feel as though you've done something naughty and you've hidden it from somebody else. So let's do the practice. Now, I want to remind you, obviously, resourcing tools. It's the same as working with difficult emotions. So we're going to do some labelling, because remember, labelling dials down the amygdala part of the brain. We're going to find where it occurs in the body. Do some self-soothe. And then because we're going to do this off-soothe and allow bit at the end, and then we'll reflect over it. This is a bit of a longish practice. We'll finish rather than 20 minutes, it'll be 30. I contemplate things too much anyway. What was I thinking about? Make sure that you only do this practice now if you feel as though you're in the right place. That's the important thing. At this time, don't dredge up anything to do with feeling real shame. Okay, I want you to leave that for your professional support counsellor. But you could say to that person, professional person, that you want to do a mindful self-compassion practice based around this, because they will be able to get you through it. Resourcing tools. If it becomes difficult at any point, remember what our resourcing tools are. Feeling the floor. Grounding, centering your breath, feeling your breath behind your belly button, okay, and not having your eyes closed, because you need to orientate in time and space, so you're not bringing too much of your attention inwards. So keep your eyes open with a soft gaze. And to be honest, if it gets too much, just stop, go have a warm bath and distract yourself with something positive. Like a cookie, some nice cakes. But grounding and centering is always really important, and labelling. It's so important. Because focusing too much on the internal states can be too much, so having your eyes open helps. It's the, like I said before, the internalised states is difficult. So we are building resources, so we will proceed with caution by only recalling something embarrassing that you did. But you know, it might be that time when I was 3 years old when I opened the washing machine when it was going and flooded the kitchen. Way! Didn't tell anybody it was me. I was managed to. But that was doing a bad thing there. Shame's really about, you know, thinking that you are bad. It's easy to feel like that, isn't it? I was a naughty one when I in my family, but they always say, they don't know about the black sheep. The black sheep in the family always is the ones that can sniff out the BS in the whole toxic family situation. So there you go, Ginger and a black sheep. And there you go. There again, there's another problem there with the stereotyping, isn't it? Because where we're using colour again out to referencing the whole idea of white and purity, and black is associated with sin. So yeah, another racial stereotype there that we shouldn't use anymore. Okay, so let's not be discouraged. So let's start. So do this in a comfortable position, either sitting or lying down. If you're going to fall asleep, I would do it seated. Okay. So your dignity and your poise. Okay, this is reflection. If your mind wanders, you know how to come back to your breath and your seat and your feet and your hands, wherever they are. Okay, I'm going to do this with a soft gaze and just look down, because I'm not going to do any of these. These are challenging practices for me. I'm working on myself. But, you know, always remember, you're not a failure if you don't carry through with it. Just go with what you need to do. Okay, so just getting ourselves into our comfortable seat. sitting or lying down, eyes closed or soft gaze. And start to take deep, relaxing breaths and bring your attention all the way down into the physical body, whatever is holding and supporting you. And a mindful attention settling on that breath as your focus that you can always come back to whenever it feels difficult. You can even do a little bit of a sigh where you can relieve the tension on the exhale, where you're just blowing it out with the mouth and inhaling through the nose. So remember the importance of our soothing, self-compassionate touch. So place your hand wherever you feel you need to. Reminding yourself where you are, that perhaps you're allowing kindness into your heart and into this practice. So wherever you want to place it, we've experimented before, we can place a hand on the heart or the belly. Wherever you feel or need to have it, you can be self-hugging, whatever feels good for you. So you're allowing that kindness to flow through your hands as if you're imagining warmth going through. Now, only bring to mind an embarrassing event. 3 on the scale of 1 to 10, 1 being positive, 10 being negative. So you can just feel it enough in your body without feeling too uneasy. And an event that made you feel embarrassed, not ashamed. You may have, for example, just overreacted with something. Or you may have said something stupid. We do it all the time. I'm constantly doing it. Or you may have sort of blown a work assignment. Or you might have realised your zipper was open. Or your skirt was still tucked in the back of your knickers after you've come out of the toilet with the tissue on the back of your foot. Is anything like that? Nothing too challenging. And it's an event that you would not like anyone to hear about because you'd just be embarrassed. Just because you think they might think less of you a little bit. Not one that makes you feel bad about yourself. Not one that makes you feel as though that you have hurt others. Or one that you feel you need to ask someone for forgiveness. Just remember that event in some detail. It may take a little bit of courage. If that helps, connect with your heart space to find that courage. Or you can make your hand into a fist over your heart and place the other hand over the top with softness. And just try to use all your senses to remember that experience. And just reflect on it. Just pin it down. Perhaps you feel it somewhere in your body. That's the important thing. You can feel it somewhere. This will help you choose. I'll just reflect for a moment and see if you can determine precisely what it was that others might be. You might be afraid that others might feel they discover about you. Can you give it a name? Perhaps you think to yourself, I feel defective or unkind or a fraud. These are just your negative core beliefs. If you found a few of them, just choose one that seems to convey the most weight. You might sense a feeling of loneliness when you connect with this experience, but a way to recognise that we're all alone together. Everyone feels exactly the same. Remember, this is an universal emotion. You just want to be loved. This is why you're just embarrassed. Now, if a friend was to name it for you with compassion, kindness and a soft, kind voice towards you, imagine what they would say to you to make you feel better. For example, oh, you've been thinking that you're unlovable. That must be really hard. You can just say to yourself in a warm, compassionate voice, as if your friend is speaking to you, I think I'm unlovable. And just remember, when we feel embarrassed, it's only part of us that feels that way. It's not all of us, it's not who we are. It's emotion. And emotion is fleeting and temporary, it's not permanent. And that we all wish to be loved. We all are innocent beings, that child who wishes to be loved. And as a reminder, remember you can come back to your resourcing tools. Eyes open, feeling the ground, coming back to your breath. Focusing on a different part of the body where you might feel a sense of comfort or sense of numbness or nothing at all. So when you're labelled your core belief, expand your awareness now to your body as a whole and try to recall the difficult situation again, but scanning your body from head to toe. And notice the one single location where the embarrassment expresses itself most strongly, where it resides. It could be anything, it could be a muscle tension, it could be a hollowness in the tummy, a little bit of a heartache. It doesn't need to be too specific. Again, please take good care of yourself and just go into this sensation, this feeling, wherever it is, entirely with compassion. Go softly. And now we're going to soften, soothe, allow. And just in your mind, gently incline towards that location. That location in your body. See if you can soften into the area. See if you can use the breath to allow the muscles to let go, to relax, as if you're submerging yourself into a lovely warm bath. Softening and softening. Remember, we're not trying to change anything. We're just trying to hold it in a tender way, like a child who's hurt their knee. To see if you can soften around the edges of it, like a pile of tennis balls. You don't have to go right in, just gently titrating around the edges. Softening and softening. And just to add to this softening process, see if you can warm around it with the hands. Soothe yourself. Place your hand over that part of the body that you feel that embarrassment. See if you can send warmth. See if you can direct it with the breath and the hands. Imagine kindness flowing towards and through it. Again, imagining if your body is a beloved child, that you're cuddling that child, because that child needs understanding. You might want to think of some comforting words. Just imagine a friend who was struggling in the same way. What would you say to that friend? For example, I'm sorry you feel this way. I care deeply about you. Other words just rise up from your heart space. Remembering once again that when we feel embarrassed, it's all because everybody feels this way. We all want to be loved. Allow that discomfort to be there. See if you can let it be in your body. Try to make room for it. Releasing the need for it to want to go away, to want to change it. Just let it be. Just allow. And if you want to repeat this practice, if you want to go a little bit deeper each time as you go into this practice, just give yourself some time to go through the cycle of softening, soothing and allowing. Easing in, softening, using the hands, kind words, and just let it be as it is. without trying to change anything. And when you're ready, see if you can let go of the practice and focus on your body as a whole. Allow yourself to be whatever it feels like, to be exactly as you are. Just notice everything coming out, in and out of your conscious awareness. Your feet on the floor, your hips against whatever is holding and support you, where your hands are. All emotions and thoughts and sounds and senses. Just coming and going. Okay, just to reflect on that. That was very challenging practice, so well done for working with courage and self-care, and that just showing some appreciation for what you've done for yourself today, because you have worked with yourself and given yourself time and self-compassion and love. There will be a lot of obstacles that will arise within a mindfulness practice. They can be very difficult. You don't necessarily have to want to work with them or not. Always give yourself compassion. And it always is the people who don't deserve to feel so bad about themselves who find this the hardest. So all I can say is, we've done backdraft before, haven't we? Where it just rushes in. You have to be very careful. Backdraft is come from the fire service term that you don't open the door, because the oxygen goes in and it takes up the full building. You open up too much emotions. When you do it properly, you just drill the holes and let the oxygen in slowly. So if this exercise was difficult for you, always shift your focus to the fact, with tender appreciation for your struggle, and that at the end of the day, you will always practice self-compassion. Now, thank you very much for the practice. Quite an emotional one for me. The important thing is that you try your best to feel safe when it comes to all this transformative healing. And there's no shame in not wanting to go further. Never push yourself. You're not here to please other people, remember. You're here to love yourself. Because as RuPaul always said, if you can't love yourself, how are you going to love everybody else? So I'll leave it with that. And take care. And hopefully see you for the next session.